Welcome to Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site and our 100th program. We are the retro talk program for nostalgia and baby boomer stuff here on the Galaxy Nostalgia Network. I'm Smitty.
I'm Mike.
I'm George.
And I'm Mike Z in my tuxedo.
Ah, yes, and on this, our 100th program, we look back at 100 shows. We also look back at blockbusters of 1962, and we look at holiday shows of the past. Well, here we are on our 100th program. Mike B., I want to offer you my congratulations, buddy, for 100 programs.
Why, thank you, and you've held up well.
Thank you, and so have you.
The 2 years have been good to you, Smitty.
They have. They've been good to the both of us, and we wanted to just spend a few minutes reflecting on 100 programs. Mike, when did we first go on the air?
Well, we put show one on the air on January 23rd on 2010. January 23rd.
2010?
2010.
Okay. Wow.
We had produced it in late 2009, and
right.
The idea came to us in 2008. We thought, it can't just be Smitty and I sitting at a Carl's Jr. talking about the great stuff, the old days, the good memories, the way they were, the way things were, and some of the things that we experienced as baby boomers growing up. There must be at least 50, 60 other people who would like to hear about this, and I've heard about this thing called podcasting. Let's give it a try and see where it goes. And, these have been about the two most interesting, adventurous, and rewarding years in my radio career. I got an early start in radio broadcasting in the radio industry way back in the late 60s, early 70s. Then I took a break, went into TV production, which led me now to video marketing production. But you always go back to your first love. And my first love in my life, as far as industry and what I do and what I love to do, revolves around radio. And because of the technology and because of the access through the internet, we can bring our thoughts and memories out to others and exponentially increase those memories and talk about them and have some fun. And all you need is an internet connection. And we've learned, Smitty, in the last 2 years that we've got friends even in Europe.
Absolutely, around the world,
Asia,
in Australia.
In the Philippines,
yes.
who are listening to us.
Yeah.
So we're glad we're delivering to the folks what we love to do and what they love to hear. And it's just been one of the most rewarding 2 years working with you, Smitty. I know we've worked at employment together,
yes.
But this has kind of been our baby. And to see it 2 years now, it's a great day for me.
It's a great day for me, too, Mike. And I remember when we first got started that you mentioned that podcasts are, in general, have a high mortality rate.
Yeah.
And a podcast is very lucky to get to a 10th show, extremely lucky to get to a 20th show. But we reached our 10th show, our 20th show. I remember when we did our 50th show, we did our 75th show, and now here we are at show 100. And we certainly thank all of our listeners who write in, who download our shows, who listen to us. We're very, very thankful to all of you who lend your support and who give us your ideas. And we've been very fortunate along the way. We've had a lot of great help along the way. We've had some great guests along the way, Mike. The roster of guests that we've had is very impressive.
Well, the people that we've had, some of our friends and some people that we had the opportunity to make new friends with, Shotgun Tom Kelly with K-Earth. Of course, he's an old friend of both of ours.
Absolutely.
But as our show evolved, we got to talk to friends, experts in the industry, and some of the best baby boomers with recollections you could ever find. David Leonard.
Dave Leonard, excellent.
When it comes to remembering radio, Top 40 Radio.
40.
Bill Earl up in L.A., incredible guy, just a wealth of knowledge and one of the neatest guys you could ever run into.
Yeah.
He's been on a couple of times. Actually went up to L.A. and met him around the same time we talked with Larry Van Nuys.
Larry Van Nuys, one of our great shows. We enjoyed Jack Vincent.
The pioneer, the grandfather, the dean, the godfather of San Diego Top 40 Radio.
And most recently, Art Astor, who we had the privilege of interviewing. We've had some great shows that have come along, and now we're particularly pleased now that we have with us George and Mike Z, who have joined us, our other two members of the Galaxy Gang. Guys, any thoughts on our 100th show?
Guys, I hope you could do another 1,000. I really do. It's a great show. I don't think you'll ever run out of ideas. It's just something it's worth making time to listen to this.
The ideas are very plentiful, and you guys come up with fantastic ideas. Our listeners give us ideas.
What I think has been so very special for me is that, as you all recall, I moved back here to Southern California after having been 25 years in the state of Washington, and we arrived here in the spring of 2010. Not long after that, I found Mike Z's wonderful program, Saturday Night Sock Hop. I had then the opportunity of getting to know you guys, and what a wonderful friendship it is. And I think it's such a privilege and a pleasure to be part of a program that informs, educates, and inspires others by taking the best of the past and moving forward into the future.
Absolutely, George, and it was because we were on the air here locally in San Diego on KCBQ for a number of months in 2011 that we met you, and certainly it's just wonderful to have you and Mike Z with us on a regular basis, and then our guests. And we have a lot more guests planned for the new season, which we've just begun, and a lot of good stuff coming up, Mike.
What's exciting about hitting the milestone of 100 shows is how are we ever going to do another 100 shows? And I think that brings the challenge and the adventure into the fact that we do with, if things go the way they've been and we keep our health up.
Yes, most important.
And get some air conditioning in the studio.
Yeah,
lots of luck.
We'll work on that. Talk to the management.
Well, yes, I will. I'm calling my union rep right now. Find me a payphone. Find it yourself. But, the excitement is putting together the ideas that we have. We've already had a considerable number of input from our listeners and our Facebook fans on what we should do on the next 100, and we're going to roll them out, in fact, pretty quick, and probably one of the next two episodes of Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site. We're going to give you a little sneak preview of what's coming up in 2013.
Absolutely. Before we get off the little bandwagon here, we thought that for those of you who perhaps have joined us recently, if you'd not heard our first show, I'm kind of embarrassed to play this, but actually it's not too bad. We thought we would just play a brief clip from our very first program.
It's in black and white.
It's in black and white, and it's a little grainy, and it kind of jumps up a little bit, but here it is. Take a listen to this from our very first program, show number 1.
Hi, and welcome to the Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site with your hosts, Smitty and Mike. I am Mike.
And I'm Smitty.
We're broadcasting from San Diego, California, in the good old U.S. of A. This is, as I say, our premiere episode, our premiere segment, whatever way you want to call it. Everybody's jumping up on the podcast bandwagon, so we thought we would too. We're a couple of old-school radio guys. And we've been driving around for the last couple of years watching the reconvergence of people going back to radio, or I guess I should say audio, to get their news and music and information. So we thought we'd do a little history show, a little retro nostalgia show on how radio got to us and how we're going back to it. There's probably not too many Starbucks that you'll go by where you don't see somebody with those little white things screwed into their ears listening to content, as they call it nowadays. We used to call it programming. But we thought it'd be a fun podcast, and we're really excited to share some of the history that we've acquired. So anyway, Smitty, what do you got for us today, this being our pilot premiere segment?
Well, Mike, we're going to allow our listeners to get to know us a little bit and talk about a variety of topics, as we're going to do on this first show, as we're going to do in all of our upcoming shows. And I think we're going to talk also a little bit today about where we can get old radios. A lot of people collect old radios, and as you know, Mike, I collect old radios and old TVs and vintage electronic gear. So we're going to talk a little bit about where we can find some of that stuff for people that are interested in collecting those kinds of items.
Well, and that was memorable as my very best attempt at normally talking at 45 LPMs and going to 33 1/3, or maybe it was all the cough medicine.
I think it was that cough medicine.
I think we both had colds that week.
We were applying Hadacol that day also, so that made it.
Yeah, I went to the broadcasting school, the Humma broadcasting school, but it was fun. We weren't quite sure where we were going, but we got there, buddy.
We got there, yeah. And that was our clip from our very first show, and we thank everybody who listens to us, and those of you who have written, and again, our good friends George and Mike Z, and we're going to go ahead and now continue with the rest of show 100.
Okay, great. It's still 2012 here over in Southern California anyway, and probably where you're listening to us, hopefully, and we like to do anniversary memories, and one of the most important anniversaries we could think of in producing this particular show was the 1962, 50 years ago, and we always talk about cinema. It's one of our favorites, if not radio or songs or celebrities. We talk about the movies themselves, and what we're going to do today is we're going to kick it around and talk about the blockbusters, the mega hits, the big screen, the big knockout ones, the ones you'll never see again, ever again, like they were made and produced and directed in the year 1962. So, you know what, here we go, the blockbusters of 62. Smitty, we were talking, before the show. There's a whole list of them. We can go on and on. We cannot do this in an hour show. We won't be able to. But let's talk about the top ones. The top ones not only with the big 5 stars that were 5-star flicks, but the ones that we remember. Lawrence of Arabia. Do you remember seeing that?
I do remember seeing that. It's been quite a while since I have seen it, but a very epic film of that time. Peter O'Toole in his role as T.E. Lawrence, the famed British officer, and his transformation from an enigmatic eccentric to a hero in World War I. Arabia. George, you remember Lawrence of Arabia?
I do, and what I remember about that whole era of 1962 was the blend of history, the blend of technology, and the interesting thing about these films, because they were typically shown on a big screen, and with stereophonic equipment at that time, is that you were literally transported not only to that faraway land, but you were transported back in time. And you really felt as if you were personally involved right there with him, side by side in battle.
Well, George, earlier before the show, we were talking about some of the curriculum and some of the classes at USC Film School, and I recall a class, the entire class was the cinemas of 1962, because they covered every genre. They covered current events. They covered historical events. We just go down a list of to me, the blockbusters of 62. Some more of a blockbuster than others, but let's talk about Lawrence of Arabia. Let's talk about The Manchurian Candidate. Mm-hmm. To Kill a Mockingbird, a historical novel. During a time in America where race relations, things were just about to turn in our society in 1964 with the Civil Rights Bill, and then we have To Kill a Mockingbird, Gregory Peck, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, the last of John Ford, the last one of the big picture westerns, and probably, if not one of the last movie of John Ford. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which brought 2 superstars from a bygone period together, Joan Crawford and Bette Davis together, in a very dark thriller. A mystery thriller.
The Longest Day.
The Longest Day. A military epic, if I've ever watched one in my life. The Longest Day.
With all due respect to Saving Private Ryan, I still think there's nothing to compare with The Longest Day.
Nothing.
And I think it's because of the clarity and the concision of that film. But something that you both alluded to is the all-star cast, the ensemble of actors. And we're not talking about actors that were just making cameos. They had substantive roles, but they all knew how to work with each other, so there was not this one-upmanship. It was amazing. They all behaved and conducted themselves as professionals. And I believe that this ensemble of all-star casts was a contributing factor into the success of these blockbuster films, which you don't see too much of now.
Well, you don't see that variety and that range in the acting capabilities, and even the range of the substance of the movie. You just don't.
And I think what's interesting about the blockbusters of 1962 is that you may recall that in an earlier episode of Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site, we did a program that I led off on regarding the adventure film and its genre in the 30s, the 40s, and 50s. And what I think is fair to say about 1962 is that it elevated that theme. And I think a good example of that was Cleopatra, which at the time was regarded, I believe, as the most expensive film ever done, because it literally recreated the land of the pharaohs, the pyramids of Egypt, and you were back there during that time. It was truly an elevation of the excellent adventure films that we recall from previous decades, but because of the blend of technology, as well as bringing into play all-star casts, it made it a real epic.
Well, and 62 was it was a magic year. I was 9 years old, but I remember those movies. I remember being taken to those movies. You talk about the social issues of the time. Days of Wine and Roses, Jack Lemmon and Lee Remick, directed by Blake Edwards. That was very controversial at the time. It was a subject that was not typically addressed in the big screen, or for that matter on TV, that issue of alcoholism and how it affected couples and relationships. But it was done with such meaning to the point, if you watch it today, there's no cloudiness in the message there. 50 years later, the message is still the same, how something can destroy a relationship and a love relationship. In 62 gave us two of probably the best pirate movies. One was not pirate movies, but old sea historical, Mutiny on the Bounty. This was Marlon Brando's chance to take on Charles Lawton in the 1935 version of Mutiny on the Bounty, but beautifully done, well done, filmed in Tahiti. Just the magic and the adventure of filming an epic like that with superstars in it, followed, of course, with the other seagoing historical novel, Billy Budd, which was one of my favorites, Terence Stamp.
And I believe that featured David McCallum.
David McCallum, absolutely, way early before Man of Uncle days. Some of the superstars who were just hitting their marks, and they weren't done being superstars. You think of Burt Lancaster in Birdman of Alcatraz.
And you think, of course, of Greg Peck in his signature role, To Kill a Mockingbird.
To Kill a Mockingbird.
And I believe that Harper Lee, who authored that award-winning book, noted that in point of fact, she based the character of Atticus Finch somewhat on having watched Gregory Peck in film. In the same way that decades before, James Hilton, when he penned the beautiful novel and then later became a film, Lost Horizon, he based the character of Robert Conway on Ronald Colman, who, of course, immortalized him on film. So it's kind of interesting to see that you see in 1962 you're following on the same themes of taking a great example of literature, translating it into the screen, and finding out that the lead character was based on the same person.
You know, and even taking a TV masterpiece and making it into an epic in 1962, Requiem for a Heavyweight with Anthony Quinn.
Yes, that was Rod Serling's script.
Yes, and had a masterpiece blockbuster on the TV screen and on the stage. But now, usually, you have to really find somebody who's got enough faith in you to take something that in 62 it was pretty well done. It was Requiem for a Heavyweight. It had you had Jack Palance, then you had Anthony Quinn. But they're going to redo it all over again into a big epic in 62, and it was beautiful. It was just
very well executed. You know, there's some interesting side stories that go with some of these films that we don't even think about. Cleopatra, of course, that starred Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, was known for its all-star cast, its exotic locales, great cinematography, the huge expense associated with making that film. I don't know that critically it was regarded as being a great success. But there's an interesting little side story to that, of course, is that most people know that, of course, is the film that brought this screen couple into real-life married life.
Oh, that's right.
But there's a funny story about that, and that is that originally Dick Burton was not signed on as the leading man. In fact, it was Stephen Boyd, who we all remember having played the evil character Masala opposite Charlton Heston in the award-winning film Ben-Hur. Stephen Boyd was slated to play in the character of Mark Antony, I believe. And then what ended up happening is that because of some delays with the film that he was currently on, Boyd was no longer available. So then Dick Burton was brought in, and as we know, the rest is history. There's some classic outtake pictures there on the set where you see Eddie Fisher standing nearby, and Dick Burton is there having his eyes on Liz.
And Eddie's mad dogging him, isn't he? Wasn't he looking at them, or was that the right shot?
I think so. It was kind of interesting to see that in terms of what's happened since then. But Stephen Boyd, with his characteristic dark Irish humor, says, "'Tis the luck of the Irish."
I remember hearing the story that, of course, that The Longest Day and Cleopatra were essentially filming concurrently. Cleopatra, as I recall, was driving the studio down because it was costing so much money. But yet here was this movie, The Longest Day, which of course is the epic motion picture about the D-Day landings in 1944, that cost a fraction of what Cleopatra did, and it brought in such a large audience that it helped to offset some of the tremendous losses that Cleopatra was causing for 20th Century Fox.
Yeah. What I also remember about The Longest Day is that for about the next 10 years, that there was always a reissuance of The Longest Day right around late May, and it would run into almost 4th of July. There was about a 1 or 2 month period there where, in honor of D-Day, that you were doing that. And especially they did an extended version, but that is an extended engagement during 1964. Which would, 64, 65.
Yes, which would have been the 20th anniversary of D-Day.
Correct.
Yes. The Longest Day is one of my favorite films. It's another film that I don't get tired of watching over. It's outstanding cast. John Wayne, Robert Mitchum,
Jeffrey Hunter.
Jeffrey Hunter, Richard Burton, Fabian,
Sal Mineo,
Paul Anka.
Paul Anka.
That had to be one of the last big blockbuster films to be filmed in black and white.
It had to have been.
Because I don't think that was done to save money. Was that done to give it kind of that historical feel because everyone's memory of the war was in black and white, or was that actually a decision? We'll save a few bucks. We don't need to shoot this in color.
A lot of films, however, were still made in black and white up until about 1965, 66.
Yeah, 64, 65, maybe 66.
It started a transition.
Strangely enough, I cannot imagine watching The Longest Day in color.
I agree.
It just does not seem right. No. It just seems like it's locked in that time period.
And I think what's interesting about that film is that you also had people that were real-life heroes. You mentioned Eddie Albert. Eddie Albert was a decorated combat veteran in World War II. In fact, I have a copy of a book that my mother gave me, signed by a great many World War II veterans in the Pacific, in the South Pacific. Eddie Albert is one of them, and he just signed it, by the way, as Eddie Albert. Yeah. It's just right there in the middle. And so you had people that were involved in the war itself, and here they are years later doing it on screen.
Wow.
Well, Mike Z has his Saturday night sock hop radio show. And a number of times he will talk about some of the songs, the then and now songs, but he'll also talk about songs that were connected in with movies. And what better guy to talk a little bit about 62 than Mike Z, who, and what I'm getting at, Mike, are Elvis Presley cranked out 3 big masterpieces, if you're an Elvis Presley fan anyway. 3 movies, and Mike's had songs from each of the 3 movies on his shows, because I listen to all his shows, because I post his website and put his MP3s up. But, Mike, Follow That Dream came out in April. In August, the summer sizzler or blockbuster Kid Galahad. And then in November, for holiday time, Elvis knew his marketing. November 21st was the release of Girls, Girls, Girls. I know your favorite subject times 3, Mike. But what was your take on the Elvis Presley's genre, where he would get up there and he'd be doing something, and it'd be summer, and the waiter would bring lemonade, a cool and tasty drink. He'd start a song out of it.
And many of them awful.
Yes.
And many of them completely forgettable.
You still have people calling in to hear Follow That Dream.
You know what? Elvis's films by that time had really gotten so formulaic. I know. No, there were no big blockbusters out of Elvis in 1962. Let me the best thing to be said about some of those films is that they were in color. That's it.
Yes.
But there was good music, absolutely. I'll tell you what, 61, 62 were some of the last, I shouldn't say the last, well, yes, I will. Maybe some of the last great years for American music, because the British invasion was coming in really quick. By 64 for sure, but man, 1961, 62, a lot of good films, a lot of good songs from films also. But the few that you have on this list were just such monstrous blockbusters. I don't think Elvis did anything really super noteworthy in those years, but they can't all be great years.
Exactly, yeah.
And is that a result of volume, of quantity of film? Cook them out, Elvis is in them, so people are going to go. Stella Stevens, she's a knockout calendar girl. They'll go because of Stella, because there was really not... It was almost like a Seinfeld episode. It's a movie about nothing.
I think those were, as my friend of mine used to call them when I was in high school. Those were films primarily for the drive-in movie crowd, who I don't think watched too much what was going on the screen. Seriously, get the kids out of the house or something. Go to an Elvis Presley film fest for a few hours.
But what I think is interesting about these blockbuster films was that this is another example, and we've talked about this on a recurring basis on the Galaxy Show, is that these blockbuster films were family-attended events. I can remember growing up here in Southern California, and I would accompany my parents. That for us, it was a major event to see these blockbuster films that we have talked about here, because you knew that it was a major event. And I recall up until 1974, you had Gone with the Wind that was always being re-released as part of the maintaining of this blockbuster tradition. And families would go to this, and they would enjoy it together.
You know what? I think the studios are really missing a bet, because there are so many great films that people would love to see on the big screen again. Reissued. We were talking one time about Mad World. How great would that look in IMAX? But there are many, many more, and I don't know why these studios don't make some really nice, high-quality prints of some of these films and reintroduce them, maybe even at a bargain price, maybe even half price. You've seen it at home. Come see it on the big screen the way it was meant to be seen. Once in a while, they would re-release The Wizard of Oz and a few other films, but it's few and far between. It's very rare.
I think that would attract a lot of people, because a lot of people prefer the older films. They grew up with the older films, and frankly, the older films are more often than not, much better than what's available currently.
By far.
Well, Smitty, I think George makes an incredibly good point, a strong point, that 62 really rolled out some good, pure family entertainment where the family could go. You didn't have to, put the popcorn bag over the kids' eyes because something happened on screen. And we talked about the blockbusters, the historical blockbusters, even the romances with Liz and Richard Burton. And let's not fail to remember that Disney cranked out a number of movies. And 62 was a big year for Walt Disney. Almost Angels. Remember, was that Haley Mills? Almost Angels?
Or remember Haley
Rosalind
Mills.
Russell, they were nuns, or it was almost a religious type picture, followed by Big Red, and then Bon Voyage, which was one of my favorite.
Fred McMurray.
Yeah, Bon Voyage. That pure family entertainment there. You could go In Search of the Castaways.
That was with Haley Mills
and
with George Sanders.
George Sanders, The Legend of
Maurice Chevalier.
The Legend of Lobo.
Yes.
You remember that one, the Disney one? It was the wolf story about that, and Moon Pilot.
I think what's interesting about these films, I'm thinking about, for example, The Longest Day. My mother graduated from high school in 1944, so she can remember D-Day as occurring right at the time of her high school graduation. My father, of course, at the time was living in Greece, which, of course, was in the midst of World War II. And so to accompany my parents to that film, I remember so long ago that my mom would remember it from the standpoint of being a high school girl in America, being involved with the war effort. My father, of course, remembers it being broadcast on the radio that the Allied forces, have landed at Normandy and they are successful. And so this was a landmark event for the liberation of Europe from the Axis powers. And to see that on film, just 17, 18 years after the fact, that's not that long if you think about it.
There was a time in America we were nearing the end of our innocence as far as society. There were some very cutting-edge movies also produced in 1962. Do you recall Lolita with James Mason?
Of course, because originally one of my favorite actresses, Marta Kristen, who of course starred as Judy Robinson on Lost in Space, that her parents would not allow her to be considered for that role, because originally I think Marta Kristen was selected as the first choice.
Well, it almost ruined James Mason's career because it was referred to by a lot of the critics, especially overseas, as smut.
Yes.
It was controversial smut.
Which is too bad, because Mason had such a distinguished and wonderful career.
And it was probably, watching Lolita, is probably one of James Mason's most brilliant acting abilities that I've ever seen him do to handle a role like that. It ranged from edgy to right out crazy, but that type of movie, and I think in 62 there were a lot of movies produced that were trial balloons. If they'll watch this and they won't run us out of town, we'll make more, because we think that's where society's going.
I think one thing also about that period is you get a chance to see actors and actresses in roles that you would never expect them to be in. I'll never forget when I first showed The Manchurian Candidate to my wife Sharon, and of course she had known Angela Lansbury from her signature role in the 1980s in Murder, She Wrote, the hit TV series. And then, of course, we find out that in the movie Manchurian Candidate, she plays a very evil and dark character. And it's not revealed until about halfway through the film. And what a startling surprise that is, to see these actors and actresses in such distinguished roles.
Thank you, Mike B., and thank you, George. We're going to take a little break now. We're going to take a little pause for the cause. I remember this next wine from when I was a kid, because when I lived in the Bronx, Mr. Rossi and his wife, who lived in the front apartment, put away a case of this a month, and I remember it being delivered. This is from the fine folks at Gallo, and not the gangster Gallos.
Wine experts spend their lives learning the quality and value of wine. They're men of strong, often differing opinions. But across the nation, they agree on one remarkable wine discovery. Hugh Johnson, the knowledgeable wine critic writing for Gourmet magazine. Gallo Hearty Burgundy was the opening revelation of my California journey. Paul Covey, respected wine editor and critic, said in Sphere magazine, Hearty Burgundy receives well-deserved recognition from both layman and expert alike. Roy Andries de Groot, wine editor of Esquire magazine, says, I have never found any wine to equal the combination of quality and value of Gallo Hearty Burgundy. The list goes on and on. Judge Gallo Hearty Burgundy for yourself. It's richer, more robust. Discover the wine that's exciting wine experts across the nation. Ernest and Julio Gallo's California Hearty Burgundy, the best of the Burgundies. Gallo Vineyards, Modesto, California.
Ah, yes, have a cup of delicious Gallo wine. Well, welcome back to Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site here on the Galaxy Nostalgia Network. And being this is our 100th show and something we haven't done in a little while, we're going to have a musical number for you that we'd like to share with you. We're going to play a song by Andy Williams. Now, a while back we did our obituary show, as you'll recall, and we covered Andy Williams, who we lost this past summer. And Andy Williams, we all remember his variety show. In fact, later on in this show, we're going to talk a little bit about some of those shows. Andy Williams, born December 3rd, 1927, and passed away this year, September 25th. Very well remembered for his variety shows that he used to do, the Andy Williams Show, as well as numerous television specials. His TV show ran from 1962 to 1971, and he was born in Wall Lake, Iowa. He moved to Los Angeles in 1943 as part of the Williams Brothers, and they sang with Bing Crosby on the hit record Swingin' on a Star. They appeared on several films in that time period, too. But here is one of his, we had a whole repertoire, obviously, of songs that we could play from Andy Williams, but we thought we would treat you to his rendition of Days of Wine and Roses. Here is the late Andy Williams.
The days of wine and roses, laugh and run away like a child at play through a meadowland toward a closing a door marked nevermore that wasn't there before. The lonely night discloses just a passing breeze filled with memories of the golden smile that introduced me to the days of wine and roses and you. just a passing breeze filled with memories of the golden smile that introduced me to the days of wine and roses and you.
What a beautiful rendition of the title song from the movie Days of Wine and Roses. You know, if any of you have not seen that film starring Jack Lemmon and Lee Remick, I would strongly recommend that you get a copy on DVD or stream it into your computer, because it's a very poignant film, very, very emotional, and I think one that you'll enjoy. Well, we look back at 1962 and we remember it as a year that probably brought the air and space age into mainstream society. So with that, we're going to go to our next retro commercial, and we're going to fly away on Delta Airlines.
Delta is ready when you are. Delta is ready when you are. Delta is ready to fly.
The singing commercial is almost as old as radio itself. The one you're hearing now for Delta Airlines is one of the most familiar songs. You've heard it as jazz and calypso, big band and western, Sousa and soul. It's a musical reminder that Delta has a flight going where you want to go, when you want to go. Frequent flights around the clock to 90 great places on Delta's 32,000-mile route map. Flight schedules to fit your schedule. But why should I talk about it when we've got singers to sing it?
Delta is ready when you are.
Well, welcome back to Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site. Now, I want to say something about this last commercial. If there's any of you out there that are keeping track of all the retro commercials that we've aired on our shows, on our past 100 shows, yes, this was a repeat. We have aired this one once before, but I wanted to air it again on our 100th show because I like it so much. Both this commercial and the Gallo Wines commercial that you heard earlier are from 1976. And they were broadcast during NBC's 50th anniversary program, 50th radio program in 1976. And this one, the Delta Airlines commercial, was voiced by the late Ben Grauer, famous NBC announcer from the golden age of radio, and some kind of a neat commercial tying in the early days of radio. So yes, that is the very first repeat of a retro commercial that we've ever had on Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site, but a great commercial nonetheless. Mike B.
Hey, thanks, Smitty. Good retro commercial. I remember that one. And
yes,
we go away from these shows after we do these. I know George and I were talking. We kind of hum those theme songs all the way home.
We do.
Those are memorable, and we're glad we're able to deliver them to you, mainly in thanks to my partner Smitty, who somehow finds these, fixes them up, takes the scratches out, and makes them real again. Thanks a lot. You know, we're hitting the holiday season here in Southern California, but of course, it goes without saying, the rest of the world. But in going way, way back, driving way down that path of memory lane, we think about those holiday TV specials that just required the family to get done with the dinner dishes and make the phone calls, get the homework done right away, and then gather around the living room, get the TV on, usually around 8 o'clock, prime time, family prime time, and start watching those holiday specials. And I have my favorites. The guys here will talk about their favorites, but you talk about something that signifies and that puts the holiday season right into context if you're a baby boomer, and those were those TV extravaganza holiday shows that the networks would carry, and it's been a great deal of money on them, and they made a great deal of money on them, and behind the scenes we're not going to talk about the business of the television industry and revenue. We're going to talk about how those were just staples in the holiday season and how we could not miss them. And most of them were not rebroadcast. You had to catch them on the night they came on the air. There was no way to record them, of course, back in the 60s and to some degree the early 70s. So, you know, we're going to talk around the studio booth here today about some of the best seasons that we remember with the holiday times, and some of the personalities. We just got done remembering Andy Williams, but Smitty, do you remember the Andy Williams holiday specials?
I do. I remember those very well, Mike. I remember, you know, just kind of that was, I think the most notable thing about that was when the family would gather together. It wasn't splintered like it is today. Somebody with a pair of earbuds in their ears and somebody in another room watching another TV set. Oftentimes there's just one television set in the family, and these specials would come on and the family would gather. I remember my dad watching the Andy Williams special. I remember sitting with him and watching it, and the guests that he would have on, Mike Z mentioned when we were doing the obits, that Andy Williams was not afraid to invite other singers, other talent. He was very, very generous with having other guests on there. And I remember, you know, usually I think my memory is sitting watching some of these specials and the Christmas tree in the corner lit up, and it was cold outside, but the house was warm, and you felt safe, and you were enjoying watching these shows. I think that's probably a feeling that maybe many of us have.
Do you recall Now, you won't recall this. Let me take that back. George, do you recall, old buddy, old chum, the mid-'60s, the extravaganzas, the Bing Crosby, 64, 65, that era, and how you almost felt like you were in Bing's living room with his family?
Very much so.
And he would have family members on the show.
Very much so. In fact, this was a staple of 1960s programming, and I think it hit its peak in the mid-1960s. You've hit on a very important theme, that you basically became part of a virtual family for a period of 1 to 2 hours. I understand, and we all know, that the holiday season can be a wistful time. It can be a time of both good memories and sometimes unpleasant memories, or a time of sadness and reflection. And yet for 1 or 2 hours, you were able to really enjoy the spirit of the Christmas season through this virtual family. And I recall that there were different junctures of these programs that you mentioned, Mike, where at one point the host, it might be Bing, it might be Andy, but they would suddenly stop and they would address you directly. It's like they were right there in your living room speaking to you one-on-one. That was really a rare gift. And what I think is very important about this is to understand this from a religious or spiritual perspective, and that is that the home is really regarded as the domestic church, and wherever Father sits is the head of the table. And so all of these father figures were there, inviting all of you in the spirit of Christmas to be part of their family for an evening, to enjoy this celebratory time. And the inclusive aspect of that was not lost on anyone. You really felt that you were part of their family for that brief moment in time, but it seemed without failure that at some point there was always going to be a scriptural reading out of the Holy Bible, usually from the Gospel according to St. Luke, which describes the nativity of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And usually it was either the father figure, or maybe he would designate someone, usually an elderly family member of sorts, to read the Christmas story and to remind everyone this is the reason for the season. We are all gathered here together in this celebratory season of love. And it's in that spirit of love that we bring you into our house, and we thank you for having us in yours. It was just so unique. You don't find that anymore in television. And despite the fact, as you all have noted, that everyone seems connected with their iPods and their iPads, the fact of the matter is society has never been more disconnected.
Hear, hear. I'm so glad to hear you say that. That is, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but well said.
Thank you.
That definitely was a different time period. The family was important, and again, George, you keeping fully in focus of what the true meaning of the season was an integral part. It wasn't just skirting around it as a holiday time. It was what was the true meaning of the birth of Christ.
Even there were skits that were there that emphasized about what Christmas was all about. And I think the success of these programs, Bob Hope, Bing Crosby, Perry Como, Andy Williams was such that other TV shows, such as Ozzie and Harriet, and others like them, would bring you into their home around Christmas time, and you had an opportunity to meet other family members. Father Knows Best, back in the 1950s, there was always a message. And many times what it involved was understanding what is Christmas truly about. And maybe it involved helping someone in need. Maybe someone that was lonely, that was sick, that didn't have anyone. And what it taught you was that Christmas reminds us that family is not based on blood relations. It's based on that which makes you feel loved. And I think that, to me, is my memory that I take from those wonderful programs. And thank goodness they're on DVD. You can listen to them again, and you feel that atmosphere of love. But I should mention just one thing about some of these programs, and that is that not all of them are just confined to that little period in the 60s. You know, Bing Crosby spanned several decades. And I recall rather poignantly his last Christmas program, he did a joint performance that's now become a Christmas classic with David Bowie, who at that time was a contemporary rock and roll star, and I think they did a rendition of Drummer Boy.
Yes, they did, Little Drummer Boy, you bet.
And I think that showed that these programs were able to take their core content of family, inclusiveness, love, celebrating the reason for the season, but also adapting to the changes in tastes in music and pop culture, but without compromising their values. And I think that's so important. These shows were about integrity, about honor, about dignity, about love. That's what those shows represented.
Going back to the TV specials, there were also specials that were almost documentaries, almost news of the Bob Hope USO specials. In the mid-'60s, as I recall, Bob Hope was always somewhere, and he was in hot zones in Vietnam. The Vietnam War was in full rage, and he actually were entertained along with the troops, because he'd have his entourage, his crew, so to speak, Joey Heatherton and the Dingalings and some of those stage acts. And Bob Hope, he'd write his jokes, and he'd entertain the soldiers, and they were saying what a giving man he was. He had never spent a Christmas at home in Toluca Lake. He was always on the road. And I remember that as, what a patriot, what a guy that'll give up being home. And he's a big star, he doesn't even have to do it, and he'll go out there, and, he was getting up into years, too.
Yes.
I think he right up into the 90s, or
yes.
to the 80s, when he finally couldn't do it anymore. But you think about the patriotism that was associated with the religious side of it, which was, of course, associated with the family side. You brought patriotism, you brought religion, and you brought the family. And you brought, of course, the country all together at a time of year where people, they were inspired to sit there and reflect during an hour or 90 minutes of a special, and maybe sit together and sing some of the Christmas carols and some of the songs. That, as Mike mentioned, that you just don't have it done nowadays. It's not, everybody's going in every which direction. I don't know of many families that sit down all at 6 o'clock at night around the same table and eat at the same time.
That itself is a rarity. It really
is
rarity,
yes.
And what you would do with these programs is usually, I recall this especially, sometimes you would gather with other families who had children, and you would watch this program, because not everyone had color TV, and so you would go and maybe someone would bake cookies, or you'd have popcorn and have hot chocolate, and it was just really a time of fellowship and friendship, and then you're watching these wonderful programs, and as you noted in an earlier broadcast of Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site, with the advent of color television, it made it even more impressive.
It did. And as I've said, we were really lucky that we all had families and we could enjoy these type of things. But I'm sure that there were many people who either did not have families, or if they were poor, maybe that's all that they could afford. They were able to watch that show and have a little family get together of something modest, and that was their Christmas holiday. So things like this kind of brought a broader world to them. I remember very clearly when I used to watch these, the one thing that I always thought about, and I was very lucky, I came from a great family, but just in my mind was, that's coming from California. I got to move there. It's probably nice and warm there. But no, seriously, that's what I thought about. I could say, well, I could see how they don't have wintertime there, and they have the tree, and they have the holidays, but every once in a while you'd get a glimpse and say, it's different there than it is on the East Coast, and that's what I thought of.
You know what I'm also remembering as well, because it all sort of runs together, but I'm remembering about Guy Lombardo and New Year's Eve. And, of course, I know that there was some earlier programs that you talked a great deal about Guy Lombardo. There's a great scene towards the end of the film, 1960 film, featuring Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine, titled The Apartment. And it appears that Jack Lemmon may be spending New Year's Eve by himself, so to speak, until Shirley MacLaine joins him at the end. But I remember he says, I guess I'll spend the New Year's Eve with Guy Lombardo. And so he wasn't really going to be alone because he could ring in the new year with Guy Lombardo. Wasn't that a fun thing? So it is kind of nice. These stars, if we become your friends, you associate them with specific holidays, with specific seasons.
Well, and the best part too, Mike Z and I talk about this all the time, is some of the things that the memories we hold so dearly, and we talk about some of these shows and the songs and the music. We are in a fortunate time in our lives that we can get those on DVD. If we go to Amazon, you can go to Amazon, you can search from the Captain and Tennille Christmas special right on through to the Little House on the Prairie Christmas special TV show to Benji's very own Christmas story. You can get them all or a few. This season I'm going to order the Andy Williams. It's a compendium of all his best clips from the best shows. Because obvious reasons, I think that'd be very special this year to have Andy Williams on the set. But my daughters are interested in this, and a lot from having heard Galaxy episodes, but a lot, Dad, what did you guys do at Christmas? It seemed like it would be so boring back then when you didn't have Facebook or the Internet, and how did you talk to people? We did something very unique and interesting. We got together face to face.
And talked, which is scary.
They came over for hot chocolate and Aunt Ruthie's cookies, and we watched them. And the kids went in the back room where the extra TV was, and they watched the Charlie Brown. That's what we did.
Or you would also watch special movies that were reserved only at the holiday time.
Yes.
I remember as a time, again, we talked about this in previous episodes here on Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site, but I remember in Los Angeles that King of Kings, which featured Jeffrey Hunter in the lead role as our Lord Jesus Christ, that was always shown on Christmas Eve. And then, of course, around New Year's Eve, you had It's a Wonderful Life on the Late Show before Ted Turner started broadcasting it repeatedly in the 1980s. But you had an opportunity to really enjoy content that was inspiring, it was informative, and it brought people together.
That's true. We shouldn't forget that the role of the media is not radio and TV is just not merely to entertain, and it's not merely to inform, but in many cases, it really is a friend to people who are lonely and don't have anyone. And that program, that TV show, that special, whatever it is something that they look forward to. And I remember, by the way, and I just want to mention, I don't think Jackie Gleason ever did a Christmas special, but I know he would often fold it into his regular Sunday night show from Miami Beach or from New York, and that was something we never missed in my house. Just something I'd like to say.
Sure.
What an excellent idea to talk about the holiday season TV shows, the stuff we grew up with. What better timely event than the holiday season, and talk about it during the holidays. So good work on all your parts. This has been a wonderful show because just talking brings back memories. I'm going to go to Amazon right after the show and start ordering up before they sell out.
Get one of those Noelco razors with Santa Claus.
The Norelco.
Yes.
Noelco, no, not Norelco. They just say on the ad it said Noelco. Remember that?
Noelco. Yeah, they did.
I remember that very well.
I remember that from
you
when I was
can
a
find
kid.
that on YouTube. I saw that.
Yes.
The other
Doesn't
day.
surprise
yes.
me.
Now, Noelco, and then, of course, all the men's shaving lotions that were in style at the time. High Karate.
And then don't forget Soap on a Rope.
Oh,
on a
the
rope.
brute soap. Always for Dad for Father's Day. Soap on a rope. Yep, that's right.
What did he get with the soap on a rope? There was something else that came in a kit. I forgot. Not a shaving mug. It was
It was a brush.
a brush.
Was it a
Yes,
brush?
it
It was
was.
a brush.
It was a brush and the soap
body
on a
brush.
rope.
Yeah.
That was the old standby. How many dads got those?
I know.
probably
I
still
did.
have that.
Yes.
As a lifelong member of the YMCA, I used to love that because I said that soap on the rope is great. After you swim in the pool, you can have that ticket to the shower. It's a lot easier.
Soap on a rope and a necktie. Dad's covered now.
Yes, yes.
And Mom
exactly.
will get some. We'll get some cooking mitts.
Jean Nate.
Jean Nate.
Jean
Yeah.
Nate. That's
Jean
right. Remember that.
Nate.
Jean Nate.
Oh, well, good stuff, guys. Thanks again.
Very
We're
good.
coming fast to the end of the show, but We invite you for another season, the 2013 season here at Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site. We've got going to get the gang together here. We're going to talk about some things that really rock and rolled, so to speak, when we're talking about 1963, but we're going to go way back to the war years, and we're going to come way forward to 73, and we're going to talk about some of the things that really started happening in our lifetimes as we were growing up and actually young adults. We're going to remember a lot of the personalities who to this day affect an important part of our lives. My partner over there, Smitty, is going to talk about the technology that maybe even 40 years ago was a dream or something you saw at the World's Fair, but that we take advantage of now every day that we use. And Smitty, I know you've got some ideas for the coming season.
We do, Mike. Well, first of all, I guess one of the more exciting things is we've got a whole roster of guests planned that we're going to be having for our new season. We're going to be talking about all kinds of different topics, from early home video recording to stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. We'll have all kinds of different topics that we're going to be covering, different people. We're also going to invite back some of our friends. Dave Leonard is coming back. We're going to have him back on, and so we're going to definitely look forward to having many, many more guests this coming season.
And I can't say this enough, we do appreciate and we do value our listenerships. Our number of listeners are growing, it seems like every week, well over 35,000 views to our website, which is galaxymoonbeamnightsite.com, but an incredible amount of weekly downloads for our shows. So we're glad you're downloading shows, especially the ones you like, but we're even more thrilled that you take those shows and you pass them around and send them over to friends, because obviously when you send a show to a friend exponentially, that friend's going to send it to somewhere else, and thank goodness that's how the Internet works. So we're glad we can keep delivering this type of information and content to you, and as we develop and we get more things going on in the little think tanks we call our baby boomer skulls here, we're going to run them, but we certainly do appreciate your ideas. We've run a lot of shows totally based on input from our friends out there and our listeners, and we invite you to check, as I say, check our website, Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site, but come be our friend on Facebook. We're going to really jazz that up this year, too. And you can find us, of course, our Facebook name on Facebook is Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site. We also really do appreciate your emails, galaxymoonbeamnightsite@gmail.com. And remember, when you're trying to get a hold of us, it's Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site, that's SITE, @gmail.com. And I think that's going to wrap up this show. It's been an hour long, but it's just flown by, Smitty.
Our 100th show, Mike, and on to the next 100.
100 years, I was going to say.
I know, it's kind of tempting to say 100 years.
Oh, gee whiz. Okay, well, look, on behalf of the whole group here, I want to thank you again for enjoying us and enjoying our show and enjoying the last 100 shows. And thank you, and God bless you. I'm Mike.
I'm Smitty.
I'm George.
I'm Mike Z, and like Mr. Rossi, I'm going to go have a glass of that Gallo wine right now.
I'm a Mogan David guy, but it's okay.
Oh, don't worry, Bubby. It's good wine, too.
You mix them together, and you walk out, and the fenders are all messed up on the Buick. Who knew?
What kind? Understood it, Baker, Bubby.
Okay. All right. Take care, everybody. Be talking to you again soon.
Bye-bye.
This is the Galaxy Nostalgia Network.